Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume.
And I'm Scott McCandless. It is the week of October 30th, and this is your Monday briefing. In Washington this week, the House was scheduled to be in recess, but is staying in session to consider several FY24 appropriations bills. The Senate, meanwhile, is expected to continue voting on amendments to a three-bill minibus FY24 spending package, and the deadline for current government funding is November 17th. On a global topic, but also happening in Washington, the OECD, United States Council for International Business, holds an international tax conference Monday and Tuesday. Sindhu?
Thanks, Scott. Newly elected House Speaker Mike Johnson has proposed a legislative agenda for the remainder of the current Congress that includes passing a continuing resolution, or CR, to fund the federal government through January or April of 2024. Joining us to discuss what this means for tax policy and a year-end tax package is Chairman Dave Camp and Janice Mays. Chairman Camp, Janice, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So, Chairman Camp, let me start with you. What do we know about Speaker Johnson and his position on tax policy?
Well, we don't know a whole lot yet, Sindhu. He was on the Judiciary Committee and the Armed Services Committee, so he's not a tax writer. But we do know from some of his previous votes and positions as a member of the House that he was against the BBB because of the tax increases in it, and he supported the House rule in January 2023, which said that tax increases can't occur without a 3/5 majority of the House rather than just a simple majority. And in this Congress, he's co-sponsored the TCJA permanency bill, so he clearly is against tax increases, wants to continue the TCJA, but he's moving into a new role as Speaker, and he'll have to balance a lot of different tugs and pulls within his conference. For example, some members of the Northeast delegation in Congress, Republicans, are saying that the new Speaker has said he's open to considering SALT changes, and that is obviously a very complex issue, and one that is complex because of the cost, complex because of the fact that it benefits higher income taxpayers disproportionately. So we'll just have to see where he goes, but the agenda is going to be busy, as Scott pointed out in the opening, with legislating and other matters that are going to come before the Congress, supplemental funding, and so that's going to be interesting to see where he actually comes down on tax policy and who his staff are in terms of helping him with those issues in the conference.
And Janice, turning to you, what factors will need to come together for Speaker Johnson to be successful in passing a CR to fund the government through January or perhaps even as far as April of next year?
He has begun to lay the foundation for getting that done without his caucus objecting to him working on it, by trying to continue on individual appropriation bills through the full fiscal year. That gives them an outlet for where they want more cuts, where they want more policy changes, et cetera. So he's got that working on one front. But he's going to need to convince those Freedom Caucus members that doing a long-term CR all the way to the middle of January or the middle of April is part of a strategic plan on his part, and not just a punt forward, kind of get this down the road before it's dealt with, but that it's a strategic plan to push up that real appropriation negotiation for the longer term against those April 30th spending cuts, that automatic 1% across the board sequester set of cuts that was agreed to as part of the debt limit bill back in the spring. So he's got to convince them this is part of the strategy to end up in a final bill with less spending and potentially more social policy spending issues. He's going to have to, though, in the end, deal with a bipartisan bill to get this done, just like Speaker McCarthy had to, the thing that kind of brought down his speakership at that point. So he's got to kind of keep moving toward that goal. One thing that could help and hurt in that context is the supplemental appropriation bill. That's going to have funding for Israel, potentially for Ukraine, for the southern border of the United States, for disaster relief. Some of that will bring people to want to vote for this package, and a little bit of that, the Ukraine issue, will split them up again. But I think in the end, that may actually help get this done.
Chairman Kemp, I want to come back to you. What could passage of a CR to fund the government through next January or April mean for a year-end tax package?
Well, it actually creates an opportunity there. And as Janice pointed out, there's a lot on the legislative agenda. And when the speaker sort of laid out what his agenda would be, he didn't mention tax policy. But I do believe that there's a moment of unanimity here. He was elected by all the Republicans to become speaker. That hasn't happened since 2011. And I think there's a real desire to try to get back to legislating. So I would say conditions have improved now compared to where they were just a few weeks ago, where it was looking a little bleak. But I think that gives an opportunity for a tax policy. And certainly there's been a lot of effort put into trying to get these matters extended. And I think this is a really critical time where the business community will need to be very active and continue to remind members just how important this is for not only their companies, but for their workers and their families, in order to have these three particular business provisions that have been worked on for a long time to pass. So I think it's a bit improved. And this speaker does have this honeymoon, or this period, I think, where he has an opportunity to try to get these very difficult things done. Because while the speaker has changed, the issues of conflict really haven't. But I think this moment of unanimity, where there was broad support for him, every single member of the Republican conference voted for him to be speaker, gives us a real chance. And I think the timeline of this has moved forward, depending on when the CR extends to, whether that's January or April. I think more likely January, but it may mean that the time really is now in order to make sure that whatever tax policy goes forward actually is part of this CR process as it unfolds.
And Janice, final question to you. In light of what Chair McCamp just said about the timing maybe now, what should companies consider doing, especially ahead of the November 17th inflection point?
It's time for the C-suite to be involved, if not already. This is kind of critical time to see if the tax legislation can ride that November 17th package, or at least be prepared and then available if other things happen before the end of the year. But it's going to actually take the C-suite to be involved. CEOs, CFOs, those are the rock stars, not the lobbyists for these groups as such. So turn them on if you've got any relationship with any member of Congress at this point. I would say especially the leadership. The tax writers want to get this done. But once they have found a deal that they're comfortable with, they're going to have to socialize that in both caucuses, in both houses, and get the leaders to realize it's something important that they want to get done before the end of the year. So C-suite involved.
Okay, Chair McCamp, Janice, thank you for your insights as always. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And for our viewers, you'll find a link to the latest Week in Review in the description of this episode. Another Week in Review follows this Friday.
And I want to point out that the latest Week in Review is with Scott McCandless. And finally, in the description of this episode is a link to a new video series from Will Morris, our global tax policy leader, called Global Tax Talk. You'll want to check that out for global tax developments. And thank you, as always, for spending this time with us. Stay with Policy on Demand for the latest developments from Washington and around the world. Take care.